Mm, mm, mm. Oh yeah, I'm with it, I'm just gonna lay back and I'm some smooth lyrics. So tune in 7 to 9:30 and don't be late. About to say yeah, ain't no half stepping with Marcus J. Word. I'm ready. Let's go. Ain't no half stepping. That's the name of the show. Yeah, Marcus J hosting and we ready to go. Yeah, Hunter talk sprinkle with a dash of humor to the legacy listeners and the online viewers. What you want to talk about? Call it. We here for you. Cover all topics. Touch on the main issues. With you flowing this show, bring the heat. The word on the street, Wizard Earl on the beat. We superb in the D legacy online. 7 to 9:30. Please be on time. Ain't no half stepper with Marcus J, my brother. If they can't hang, word to their mother. And he been on this grind for a while. Brother so smart, plus brother got style. Up in Richmond, we on the mission. Before force, listen up. Marcus J start to talk running back. And he been on this grind for a while. The brother so smart, plus brother got style. Up in Richmond, we on the mission. Before force, and listen up. Marcus J start to talk.
All right, y'all. Ain't no hashtag Marcus J is live. We obviously are not in the building, but we are in fact live. We were supposed to be on hiatus this week, and we expect to be next week, obviously, with it being a holiday. But with what was done in the Supreme Court of the United States last week, we felt that we would be irresponsible if we didn't come online and have a conversation with you guys about it. So that's why we're here. You can see the usual suspects there with us and who are going to be. We're all in our homes. We're not in a new den. We're in home den today. So, but we'll still do our normal show the way we do it. We're just a little bit later than normal. So you've got the flagship show of Legacy Internet Radio. We call this thing here that we do Ain't No Hashtag Marcus J. It's live. It's right now.
Mm, mm, mm.
It's about that time. It's about that time to get. Yeah.
Open your lip. Open your ears. Strap on your thinking cap. Socially conscious talk that's entertaining with a dash of humor and the top sports stories of the week. It's time for Ain't No Half Steppin' with Marcus J.
Sellers has Jordan. Jordan, seconds to go. Stop. It's good at the buzzer. Michael Jordan has won it for Chicago. Manning lobs it. Burris alone.
Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier. He hits one deep to right center. That ball is out of here. The Yankees win the pennant.
Ain't no half stepping with Marcus J is live. We are in our mobile dens at home or our home dens, but we're still here with you, and our phone lines are open. Be down with us tonight at 804-402-2893. Be part of the show tonight, and we are very, very excited to bring you the flagship show of Legacy Internet Radio. We call it Ain't No Half Stepping with Marcus J. As I said on the intro there, we're here tonight because the Supreme Court has decided that they will no longer receive Roe versus Wade the way it was before. It has been rescinded, and now the states have the opportunity to do what they want to do. It's not protected on federal level any longer. Now, I'm not really good with terminology. I'm a lay person, but I do have someone on the show with us tonight, or we have someone on the show tonight that is much better at those things than I am, and she's making her long-awaited return to the show. We're very excited to have our sister and yours, Legacy Internet Radio, royalty and alumni, and a part of the show. She is my sister and yours, the legal, our sister Tamika Robinson. What's up, Tamika? I can't hear you. Take us off of mute. Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Nah, I got you now. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
It's been a long weekend.
It's all right. It's all right. How you doing, man?
I am good.
Yeah.
Recovering from the Supreme Court dropping a decision on a Friday
Right.
and
Yeah.
fallout happening
Yeah.
over the weekend. Yeah,
And you know they meant to do that.
on
That
You
was
know they
purpose.
did. You know.
Mhm.
So let me go ahead and continue with the introductions, and then we'll get into what we're doing. Of course, when we're in the den, she's sitting on my right side because she's my right hand. Today, she's in her space, and I'm in mine, and so is Tamika and hers. She is my sister, Nicole Savano, has Steppin Marcus J. Our sister, Steph B. What's up, Steph B?
Hello,
Go ahead,
always
say it.
forward.
There you go. She said it.
Always
What's up?
always forward unless we regress and then
Yeah,
a little bit
yeah.
backwards. How about
I don't know that
that?
always forward is going to apply to tonight's show because of the topic at hand. What do you think?
Yeah, this is gonna, I wish we were in always forward mode. I'll say that. I wish that we were. And I think what we discussed tonight, I'm really excited to hear what Tamika has to say about all this. Of course, I think it's important and relevant that we have a diverse panel. So it's good to have a man involved in the conversation. Obviously, I think a lot of times people assume we want to leave men out of these discussions. I think it's important that they're included. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see what we get into. And I hope people call in tonight of all nights.
Tonight would be the night, and if they don't call in, the regulars who watch and listen and participate and share and bond with us, who usually comment, we usually have a few now, but we're starting about an hour later than normal. In the interest of full disclosure, you want to know the real reason why we're starting at 8 o'clock tonight instead of at 7 o'clock tonight? You want to
What's that?
know? Because I was supposed to be going to yoga, man. We were supposed to be doing no show tonight, and then it rained, and then it rained, and I didn't even go to yoga. You know what I'm saying? So, I'm still chilled out about that. But it's all good. All right. So listen, let's get into it. Try to have some spirited conversation here. Let's get with you first, Tamika. As our legal eagle, set it up in layman's terms for us what Roe versus Wade was, and what the fact that it is no longer a federal protection, what that means for United States citizens. So set that up for us. Steph, I want you to comment first after Tamika, and then I'll kind of have what I need to say, and then we'll round table and include any of the listeners and viewers who want to chime in with us tonight. Go ahead, Tamika.
Sure. So of course I gotta look to the side on my notes. I I am about my notes.
You got to come to court prepared, sis. I like it.
Listen, I got
Right.
tabs and highlights and everything. Okay.
Hey, I'm all for it.
So, so we know Roe was the case that was decided that essentially stated that people had a constitutional right to abortion, access to abortions. And not long after Roe, when we say not long after in terms of legal terms, not long after, but I think a couple decades later, Casey came along. And Casey started also talking about the right to contraception within the context of a marriage. So if you put those two cases together, it was pretty much law by the court, not law because it was written and codified into a statute, but law by the court that things along the terms of contraception or birth control and abortion is part of a right to privacy. Everybody has a right to access to these things. States can't do anything that make it harder for people to access these things. And that has pretty much been the rule of law since, I believe, the 60s or 70s when Roe came out, all the way up until now. So what happened? Well, Not considering the fact that we have a 6-3 balance in the court between conservative judges and more liberal thinking judges. What happened is they looked at Roe and they looked at Casey in conjunction with a case out of Mississippi where the facility was saying that the Mississippi law was pretty much trying to ban people's access to abortion, and it was unconstitutional. So that's how this got up to the Supreme Court. Where everybody's beef is, the Supreme Court looked at Roe and they looked at Casey and they said these cases were problematic because the foundation that they were decided on wasn't a true foundation. It seems to be more of a construct that was created so that the cases could be decided that way. And a lot of what I'm seeing, and I'm continuing to see as I continue to read through this 230-page opinion, is that you're going to hear the terms thrown around, substantive due process, and that this isn't right and it's not constitutional. Pretty much what the court is looking at is abortion or the right to abortion something that's deeply rooted in the history and tradition of America? If so, that could make it protected constitutionally because it's not written there expressly, but could it be such a fundamental right because this is just what has always been? If you look at it, the answer is maybe not, right? Because there was a long period of time where a lot of states, I think about 3/4 of the state, had made abortion a crime. And it really wasn't until Casey came out and other laws had come into effect that it wasn't that. So looking at all that, the court decided, look, this was wrong. Roe was wrong. It should have never been decided that way, which makes Casey wrong because Casey didn't really do anything but say, well, we're going to follow Roe. This is what Roe is. This is the precedent, and we just have to follow the precedent. And they didn't really answer any questions. Now the court answered more questions. And they're like, there's not enough information here. There's not enough going on that we have to make this a constitutional right. So if it's not a constitutional right, it goes back to the states. And each individual state can decide what happens with its citizens medically, especially when it gets to abortion. So now each state has the right to decide that. And they can ban it whenever they feel is appropriate. They being the legislature, and the legislator being the elected people, the elected representatives of the people. So they're supposed to be speaking on behalf of the people, saying this is the people's will in this particular state. Got a lot of question coming up now, right? Because people are going to be trying to cross lines to get access to these services. And then you're going to have questions of, our insurance policy is going to cover this? Because now you're going to a different state and you're having medical procedures done in a different state. And there's about to be a whole backlash and a whole bunch of fallout that's happening with this.
Okay. Well, that was a lot. And it was helpful. It's definitely helpful. Thank you, Tamika. I mean, having somebody in the room, Marcus is right. Having someone in the room that is well-versed legally is excellent for legacy, and that it's you makes it even better. A Black woman, an attorney, and someone who clearly understands the scholarly aspect of it and can speak to it from a human perspective. I think that's where this needs to be, right? Is that a human perspective? So when you start talking about, the laws and access to, and whether or not the Supreme Court feels like that access to, contraceptive rights, because that's really what this is, and reproductive rights, and whether we get any say over that, whether that is their say or the state say, is an immediate space for argument, right? Mm-hmm. It goes, in my opinion, it then starts to become, if we're watching this and we're just stepping back as people who report the news and don't have an opinion, the big argument is really, once you move it to the states, or the conversation is, once you move it to the states, then we have the unfortunate element of healthcare not being accessible to every woman. And I think that is one of the bigger arguments, is that now we're determining state by state who gets what services, or who gets what procedures, or access to whatever procedures. The other side of that is, you and I both know, and Marcus as well, that for a long time, the Supreme Court has been stated as apolitical. I think most of us have known that that's a lie. That the reason it has been so imperative and dogged on the right to finally win an election, and noted they did not win. They haven't won an election with the popular vote since I think it's since the 70s.
Was it Reagan?
Since Reagan?
It might have been.
Yeah.
In 80.
Since
I
Reagan,
think it's
early
Reagan, 1980.
Right. So we now have a Supreme Court that's supposed to be apolitical, scheduling or creating politically driven and religiously driven doctrine and acting it into law. That is a big conversation that surrounds this. I think if we just take it to whether or not women should have access to health care, I think that's going to become, it seems silly to me to be having that conversation. But we also know what people did when Affordable Care Act was proposed. We did not all believe that everyone should have access to affordable care to be able to take care of themselves. This, arguing that abortion is a right based on healthcare, based on access, I don't think we're ever going to get past that. I do think a huge conversation, because this is going to continue to happen. Right? We're talking about Roe today, but in his decision, Clarence Thomas mentioned everything but loving, right? So he's willing to look at gay marriage. There's so many other elements that he's willing to look at. And what I think the greater conversation is, why do we have a Supreme Court that is making decisions that are driven by religious doctrine, because that's what this is, that are driven by religious doctrine, and then by the doctrine of individuals that are pushing them politically. The two things that the Supreme Court and the United from, right? It was separation of church and state. We're now quickly going to the wayside. We even had an argument today and a decision today made surrounding prayer in schools. So, ultimately, and I don't know if you agree with me, Tamika, I think right now the fish is rotting from the head. You have a Supreme Court that is hugely politically motivated. At least 4 of those justices lied and said that they would see Roe as the law of the land during their confirmation hearing. So that either means, yes, they saw it and then decided that it didn't matter that they saw it that way, or they never saw it as the law of the land. Whether we agree or not with the supporting elements of it, that is a bigger conversation. This is not the law of the land in the eyes of the Supreme Court justices that voted against it or that struck it down because of what? Because of religious and political motivations. And I think that's a larger conversation for this country, because people are assuming that right now this is just about women and women's health, but this is a very slippery slope.
This is about, to me, taking rights away. When I look at the Supreme Court, I have often looked at the Supreme Court as being the one of the 3 principal parts of our country that had some sort of integrity. I've seen presidents in the past that I just didn't agree with and didn't trust. I've seen certainly members of Congress on both sides, whether it be the Senate or the House, that, quite frankly, these are nefarious people. But the Supreme Court, for me, always seemed to get a little bit of I don't want to say pass, but, they seem to be above some of the stuff. largely because certainly in my lifetime that I can recall, there has been the kind of decisions that have been so polarizing that have gripped and captured the country. Um, Aside from the fact that they haven't or have chosen not to do anything with regard to gun laws, but it has to get to them before they could do anything about it, which is a different thing. But when I come to this, it's a very odd thing being a guy, being a man in this conversation, because I often would tell white folks when the conversation is surrounding racism, if you are not going to be a part of the solution, then just don't say nothing, because we all have cultural conditioning that is going to cause us to perform a certain kind of way, and your cultural conditioning based upon racism ain't helpful. So just stay out of the way. And as a man, on this particular topic, I almost kind of feel like just kind of using the analogy, the white people here. You know what I mean? Just looking at it and seeing it not necessarily directly affect us as men, but then you have to pay attention. Just like you tell white people with racism, you got to pay attention because this affects all of us. You know, Martin Luther King says injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. You know, and so as a man, you know, I understand and realize that because I don't have lady bits, I don't get to be a part of certain discussions when it comes to lady bits, right? So it ain't up to me as a man to say you should or you should not have an abortion. That's a woman's right to choose. It's her body. It's her right to choose. I don't know what it's like to be pregnant. I don't know what it's like to be violated. I don't know what it's like to be around men and feel uncomfortable just by virtue of how he's behaving. You know, I don't know what it's like to have sex with a man when I don't want to, but it's just easier to do that in the moment as opposed to saying no or fighting him off or all of those things. I don't know what that's like. I don't know what it's like to be fearful of what's going to happen to me when I have this child going inside of me that I am able to do anything to take care of for whatever reason. I don't know what those feelings are like, and neither do the men on the Supreme Court. And there are 6 conservative justices, and one of them, as a woman, agreed with the men who were the ones who made this decision. And so my perspective as a man is, dude, what are you talking about? Like, why are you talking? You know what I'm saying? Like, obviously, legally, you know, you're not going to just have the 3 women on be the ones at the side. Like, I'm not naive. I understand that, but I think there should be some deference here to those who know better about what should happen with their bodies. So, you know, it's a difficult one for me, but then it's not it's a difficult one for me in the sense I can't believe that we live in a country that allows people unaffected to make decisions for other people. But then again, as a black person, I guess I do know what that feels like. And so
Well,
I just, you know, I'm very, very, very frustrated for our sisters. I got a wife, I got a sister, I got y'all, I got a daughter, I got auntie, you know, who are all affected by this. And because they're affected, I'm affected. And so that's what I wanted to make sure that I led with. I wanted to lead with that because I don't want there to be any confusion when you're talking about me and how I feel about this. At a point of staying away from it over the weekend in social media for a couple of reasons. One, come on vacation. I didn't want to talk about it. And it was heavy, you know, and there's a lot going on with this. But now, you know, that we've kind of come into, you know, having a few days to see and to be able to absorb what has happened. Hey, look, I took us out of hiatus. We weren't supposed to be doing the show tonight. We supposed to be on hiatus. We supposed to be on vacation for this show, and in legacy and in radio. But we would have been, in my opinion, I think you ladies agree, somewhat irresponsible if we didn't come and we had a conversation about this here tonight. Ain't no half stepping with Marcus Day live from our own home dens of legacy and radio. Steph and Tamika, big sister's checking us out this evening, and she is saying good morning. And so, although we are not together, we are going to still give her the same love and salutations that we always would give her. So we're going to look into our collective cameras and we'll say together, good morning,
Good
Sue.
morning, Sue.
Not our best, but you get the point too. We love you.
Yeah.
I want to say thank you for saying what you said, because I want to be clear. I do think that there is some relevance and in hearing the voices of men. I do. I don't think that they're irrelevant to the conversation, but I think that some voices are irrational and therefore unwelcome. When you step into the conversation and you lead with your own emotions about it, your own misplaced emotions because you're seeking control, then it's probably not the right conversation for you. You know, I was having a discussion with someone earlier, and I said, you know, I probably shouldn't talk to a married woman about being single, because what does she really know about that anymore? Right. So there's just certain conversations. All she can really do is listen to me, quote unquote, bitch and moan. She really can't do much more than that. And she really doesn't have a significant of a value to that conversation because she's not actively living that life. And so I think when it's not that we have an expectation that everyone agrees. I think that there is a side that is forcing their perspective religiously. And that is where I have a major issue. As someone who would identify for years and even now as personally pro-life, but publicly and as a voter pro-choice, I cannot be anti-choice because I don't know what's going on in your home, heart, or mind. I don't know how this pregnancy is impacting you. I think that we talk about abortion from such a broad, high level, uneducated space that these conversations get, that the truth of it gets muddled. So, for instance, the fact that abortions are performed for many other reasons other than an unwanted pregnancy. They are performed on periviable and non-viable pregnancies as well. So you look at the maternal death rates of Black women in America when giving birth. You know, maternal birth that we at a rate higher than anyone else. How can we then possibly step back and have a blanket judgment that no one should have access to something that would save their lives? And so this you know, the nature of people showing up to argue against women who you know, may not have had access to great contraceptive care, because let's be clear here, we're also dealing with an America that until the early 2000s was the religious right was pushing abstinence as the way to not be pregnant. They were pushing it so hard that they were removing during the 80s and 90s, removing sex education from classrooms and things like that. So now you have undereducated people as it relates to sexual health, living in environments with a lack of reproductive care. You know, people think that Planned Parenthood is everywhere. It's not easily accessible to everyone, nor is good reproductive care. You have a large majority of American women still struggling to access health care. And that health care is relevant to more than just having an abortion. That health care is relevant to uterine health. That health care is relevant to vaginal health. That health care is relevant to sexual health outside of reproduction. And so when we jump into this argument and immediately code it in Jesus, so to speak, it removes the science from it. And let's be real, we're a country that says that we are a republic. right? Where we all have a say, but the majority rules. We are now watching the Supreme Court make decisions based on a minority opinion. That in
It's funny.
itself, to me, is enough to fight this.
It's funny, Steph, that you make that point, and I want to bring Tamika in here and to make her point here as well. But when you say majority, I've seen polls, and every poll that I've seen with regards to this is somewhere in the neighborhood of 2-1 that would have preferred that this overturning did not happen. It comes down to, for me, Tamika, it just sounds, Steph, it sounded like were the religious aspect and how that being the foundation of it being an issue for you. And it's funny because I was listening to the pastor I listened to yesterday, and he talked about how in some of the other churches, some of the more conservative churches, they're celebrating that this happened,
Yes.
versus in our churches maybe not so much. But for me, it ultimately, Tamika, it comes down to it being your choice. You know what I mean? Like, I guess as a guy, I got a problem with anybody, but specifically a bunch of dudes, even if they are Supreme Court justices, telling a woman or a nation of women that you cannot do this with your body. And in some states, there's no reason that they would allow it to happen. If there's incest, if there's rape, if there are heinous reasons other than, not even other than, if there are heinous reasons that you're pregnant, you cannot have an abortion. And this is the last thing that I'll say. I'm going to read Laurel's comment, then I want you to jump back in. These women ain't having sex with themselves, man. Like, really? Like, come on. Like, bro, you want to get some, right? But then she gets pregnant. It's her fault. It's her problem. Like, come on. Like, come on. Laurel says this has nothing to do with religion. They are using that as their shield. But it's all a control issue and a race issue. We definitely can get into that. Tamika, jump in here, turn your mic back on. What's your thoughts on this, where we're at here?
All right. So you touched on a lot of things to kind of break down and see, right? Generally speaking, let's be clear, and I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here. Let's be clear. The Supreme Court, in overturning Roe, did not say and make a decision as to whether abortion is legal or illegal, right? We're going back to the states' rights argument. And where have we heard this argument one time before, right? States' rights. Right. So really, this is something that the legislature should have done, and they dropped the ball. One thing that this, when reading this opinion, one thing they talk about is how the Roe opinion is written like a piece of legislation. And that's where the problem comes into, right? So pretty much the Roe court set it up, served it perfectly to Congress. And for more than 20 years, they have not taken any action on this to codify it and make it land, the law of the land. And they had every opportunity to do so, and they can do so. Even though the basic rule is, if it's not a specific power in the Constitution that says the federal government can do it, pretty much it's a state right with making certain decisions. Right. But there are a lot of ways Congress can usurp that and take that and bring it into their realm. And they use the Commerce Clause all the time. Well, this is going to affect interstate commerce. So for that reason, we're going to legislate on it and make a decision and make it, the rule across the board. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that Roe, the overturning of Roe, does not mean that abortion is illegal on a federal level. It means, the states need to bounce back to this. Right. And so now it's up to the people of that state to vote in representation that is going to do the will of the majority of the people. And you
Yes.
already know that you don't have that, because people like Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell, all those people, they're just continuing to be voted in each and every session by name only. There are plenty of good candidates that are either from the Republican Party or the Democratic Party that can replace them and are willing to do the will of the people, but that's just not happening. So one, you want to fix it, either get out and vote, right, the issues, or get in there and step in there and put yourself in a situation where you can be, elected into office to deal with it. Now,
I just want to say one thing there, Tamika, and I 1,000% agree with you, and thank you for that clarification, because everybody does need to understand that. Even here in the state of Virginia, Governor Youngkin is already moving forward to see how he can edit the current abortion laws and the clauses by reducing it down to 15 weeks. There's also now going to start at the state level conversations about science among people who don't get the science. Attorneys and
Right.
judges and politicians, none of them get the science. It shouldn't even be argued without a physician present. And if you look at public health associations, if you look at all of the major physicians associations that talk about these things and are behind some of the science that people use on either side, most physicians associations and the national health associations agree that the term pregnancy viability, which is what a lot of this comes down to, is not a real thing, that you cannot say there's a finite number, that 15 weeks or 20 weeks. Also, when you think about what's happening, I love what you talked about, how it's being pushed down to the states. Absolutely. There was some time ago with all of us, you've been in the room with Marcus and myself, and people have called in and said, I don't vote because it doesn't matter anyway. This is why it matters.
Yep.
You now have state representatives. You now have representatives that have been sent to the Senate and Congress, and that are making decisions on our behalf. And they are not speaking for the majority of people. So you're absolutely right. This and this isn't even a Democrat Republican thing. This is hugely about your and the person who spoke up, she's right. It didn't become a religious thing until Jerry Falwell picked it up as a religious thing. Prior to that, Jerry Falwell associated as a race thing. And that's what made him start to push it as religion. Before that, he had no stance. And I use Jerry Falwell because I have intimate experience having gone to Liberty at one point. I use him because he was one of the people on the religious right to push it. So while it may not be about religion at its core, the understanding of the people who are fighting for it now, that is where they stand on it. They are not fighting, so we almost can't go back to how in the 70s this was utilized as an issue of race, right?
It's an interesting thing that you say, Steph, when you mentioned the voting angle, because there's so many layers to this, And when you mentioned the voting angle, we were taking calls, it's an opportunity to mention it, we've been doing radio for 11 years almost, since 2011. And so this is our, third president that we've been on. We've been through with 2 or 3 presidential election cycles.
3 elections.
I'm interested for this. I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of y'all for being a part of this. But I remember during the time when, people were so frustrated with Hillary Clinton and didn't want to vote for her. And I was one of them. And I'll be transparent about that. And I did not vote for her. Didn't vote for Donald Trump. I voted, but I didn't vote for her. And when I look back at those of us who split the vote and did not give it to her, you don't live your life in regrets and things of that sort. But the reality is, when Donald Trump became the president, I don't know there would be any different had there been a different Republican president. But the fact that it was him and he was able to put 3 conservatives on the Supreme Court, that was one of the main reasons to vote against Republicans at the time when you looked at who was going to be leaving the court. And so now you got Gorsuch and Kavanaugh and Coney Barrett, who are all relatively young. I think the youngest of the 3 of them is like just a little older than we are.
She's like 53.
The youngest,
Coney Barrett is 53. And Kavanaugh is not that much younger.
Yeah, they're just, they're a few years older than we are. And if we're lucky, we're going to live another 30 or 40 years, which means if they're lucky, they're going to live another 30 years and they'll be potentially on the bench.
Yes, maybe Coney Barrett will be Ruth Bader Ginsburg at some point. And it sounds crazy when you say it that way, but really, this is a young woman with young children who will be the person that determines what happens for your daughter, Marcus. And the fact of the matter is, and the unfortunate part of it is that the courts don't have there is no rescinding. They could, but once they make a policy, I think the Legal Eagle will agree, when they put something into law, it is very hard to overturn a law. That's also why this is so significant. This is an area where the Republicans are phenomenal. They are spot on. They know how to work the system. And Marcus, to your point, yeah, lots of people split the vote. Lots of people said, I can't vote for Hillary. I'd rather give a vote to Jill Stein or write someone in. This is why you can't go that route. There's no longer a central position. You and I both talk about being centrist and being independent all the time. I love that about you. When it comes to politics, the right has moved so extremely right. They'll tell you that the left has, simply because many people on the left have gone socially broad, right? We socially understand, if you are socially liberal, that who someone lays down with and wants to marry is not your business, right? They see that as far left. The truth of the matter is, most progressives that ran over the last 2 elections were not elected. Democrats do not really elect far left individuals. You can disagree with AOC and Ayanna Pressley, but they are not far left. They are just progressive in their thought as it relates to race, as it relates to policy, maternal health, and all of those things. For the right, they have been so firm and rigid. And Marcus, this is what has gotten them to the polls time and time again. No matter how many times they lose the popular vote, they show up. They show up because they know there's something to say about political stick-to-itness, political tenacity.
There's something to be said for that. Ain't no have Steppin March Day. Live from New Den Legacy and that radio, our sister Mama Michelle is checking us out. She says it is exciting to hear the legal in the mix. And she's saying, good show. Legal is a good time for you to step in and offer your next level of commentary here. What you got?
Let's talk about this on one of the other issues that this is affecting, right? At the end of the day, this boils down to states' rights, because it's argued, right? We're talking about this in the racial construct now. It's argued that the state has an interest in new life being produced and adding new citizens to its population, right? So let's talk about how the rep in Illinois, Miller, I think it is. So her misnomer or her misstatement in thanking President Trump for, right? Thanking him for, protecting white life, right? So let's
right out
legal.
Quiet all the way loud. She kept that joint funky. White light.
100%.
You know what I mean? And then you got some Tamika. They got some who are trying to say she meant to say right
to life.
Man,
no,
come on, man.
Like,
I respected her so much when I heard her say that, because she kept it funky.
She did.
And she waited.
She did,
Here's my
Marcus.
thing. Here's my thing. If you're making a public speech and you misspeak and you say, you either keep going and you correct yourself and you keep going, or you try to fix it somewhere in there. But she said it, she stopped, she waited for the response from the crowd, and then she kept going, which is why I'm like, this was not a misstatement. This was not a Freudian slip or whatever it was. She intentionally said what she said. And if you look at the overall statistics with regards to who was actually getting abortions and just removing it out of the urban population, we can understand why there's also some motivation to put this back into the hands of the state, who has an interest in new citizens being born to that state.
Right. And to people who believe a certain way in that state. Now, this is the question that I have, Tamika, and, we haven't gotten here yet. This is a fresh and new thing. Although I will say, you can go back and there are multiple videos of Hillary Clinton, and I don't want to debate whether she should be president or not, because I think everything we've experienced in the last 5 years will tell you there was no lesser of two evils. There was evil in the right choice, and we made the wrong choice. Collectively, the wrong choice was made. I don't care what anybody says. You don't have to love Hillary to agree with a policy, right? Now that it's trickling down to state rights, what I don't think people truly understand, and why you and I both are probably harping on vote locally. As a matter of fact, Abigail Spanberger's opponent, and she's from District 7 here, Abigail Spanberger's opponent today basically went down she's a police officer who said, I have only had one rape victim that was a product of incest that I ever had to, come and make an arrest for, or whatever.
That's what her opponent said?
Her opponent said that. And then she also went down the lane. I don't know if you guys recall when a male senator or congressman some time ago basically said the body will shut down when you are being raped. She went down this lane. And I'm bringing it up. Yes, it's laughable. The three of us know this is ridiculous. But I'm bringing it up because she is the candidate in a state that has no trigger laws. Virginia did not have any trigger laws associated with Roe. And she's speaking the language of the state legislation in all of the other places that have trigger laws. If you do not get out and vote against this woman, we will be dealing with the very same things that Louisiana, Mississippi, Texas, and all of those other places are, unless it's codified into law. So, Tamika, can you give us a little bit, the governor of New York has already taken steps, along with Letitia James, the attorney general, to move into codifying Roe into law. Can you address that? Is it fair for me to ask you that?
Address it how? Like what we should be doing here in Virginia?
Explain what it is, because not everybody knows. I had to do my homework too. But what will codifying Roe or abortion rights into state laws do? And people are also calling for Biden to codify it into law. And I'm confused about whether or not that's something he can do successfully.
Okay, so let's start at the Biden and trickle down to the state, right? Because Biden represents the federal government. Does he have the authority to make an executive order with regards to this? I would say he'd be reaching, right? Yeah. That's like making an executive order regarding healthcare or whatever else. I mean, technically speaking, his lawyers can probably find some small loophole or door that could get him into doing that. But I don't think that he would let his administration, or he would even do that, because it's such a slippery slope to be on. However, can the federal Congress still go back and make a law and codify it? The answer is yes. They can, if they pull it into their power grip, and they have to use a vehicle to do so. the Commerce Clause is usually the vehicle that they will use to do so. Generally speaking, like we touched about just a little bit earlier, the Constitution really tells you state rights versus federal rights, or really it just outlines congressional rights, and everything else is delegated to the states.
Right.
Unless the federal government can find some way to pull it back into their power, and they can use the Commerce Clause to do so. Things that affect interstate travel and the economy, Congress can go in and regulate. So they probably could do it if they wanted to. The same with immigration, right? But look at how they're not taking a move on immigration, and they need to. They're definitely not getting ready to make moves on Roe. Let's just be clear about that. Regardless of what we're thinking about it, you have some Democratic representatives that probably feel like, they may be pro-life or whatever. And so I don't think this is something that they're really going to touch. I'd be shocked to see if they think about touching it and if they can actually accomplish it. I'd be totally shocked. Okay. But now on the state level, the state General Assembly, at least here in Virginia, the General Assembly, you can have a representative introduce a bill that would put into law protections for abortion, whether it's in emergency circumstances, whether you're going to limit it or not limit it with regarding to weeks. They can make definitions based off of what they would deem viable or not viable. If we're using that term, it's a dangerous term to use, but if we're going to be using that term, and then, the bill can go through the regular legislative process, make it to the floor and get a full vote. The governor can sign it in, or he could try to veto it, and then it goes through that particular thing. If it makes it into law, it would come up for like the next legal session, I think, which would go into effect like next July 1st, unless they try to do something to put it into law right away. So with that in mind, because first of all, we already know Amanda Chase, let's be clear, Senator Amanda Chase is already working on legislation to try to just keep abortion outlawed, period, in the Commonwealth of Virginia. She's already made that stance perfectly clear. So you really need to pay attention to your local reps, your state representatives, not the federal representatives like Abigail. Abigail Spanberger is on the federal side. You need to pay attention to your local people. You need to tune into PBS and Channel 24 or whatever cable networks when they're having their debates, right? Because they're not going to tell you. You have to look for the information because they're not going to tell you when it's going to be. You need to go to these town halls and ask these questions so you know where your potential rep stands, and then you need to make sure that you're getting out there and you're voting. And you have to be careful because remember, here in Virginia, they just split the 7th, and they shifted Abigail's district a little bit more out of Richmond. So that line is very succinct. So you need to pay attention to what district you're in and who you're running for, because you think that you'd be voting for Abigail, but you may not be in her district anymore. That line has shifted. Right. So you have to pay attention to that too.
Right.
And how Steppin with Marcus J live from New Den. Legacy and Radio. The phone lines are open, folks. If you're listening and watching and you want to be a part of this, call us at 804-402-2893. It's funny how we mentioned Abigail Spanberger a few times. We had her on this show when she was running for Congress, and I came away impressed with her, thinking that she would do a good job in DC. So I just, I'm glad to hear that she sounds like she's working for us. Getting a couple of comments.
Marcus, she better pull it together, because Abigail has said a lot of things recently that would isolate and ostracize, if not for this argument right here, right now, isolate and ostracize a large population of women that pushed and voted for her. And those women are Black and brown women.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, it's funny. I'm definitely glad you made that point, because everybody that we vote for need to be pushed, and often they will come complacent in their positions. That's how you end up with somebody who gets sent back to Washington for generations as opposed to years. They're there for generations. So yeah, we don't vote for her in name. We vote for her hopefully because she's earning the votes. Let me get these comments. And Laurel says, so are we at the mercy of whether Congress will get their act together and move on this? Is the question. And then Ernest is checking us out. Peace to you, Ernest. Thank you. Ernest says great information. Yes, they have, because he's in the 7th district, so he's familiar. He's familiar with that. I want to take a little bit of a turn, still with what we're talking about here, but I want to take a little bit of a turn. I want to talk a little bit about how these decisions are affecting us as communities, because they're divisive, and all of these divisive situations and conversations, they permeate how we relate to each other. And, I'm one that believes that everybody has a right to their own opinion, no matter how stupid it is. Just like saying stupid with 2 O's.
You love saying
Just like
gotta
saying
get
stupid.
those 2 O's in there.
Too stupid. Here's the thing with it, right? Just give me a little bit of room because I'm about to rant a little bit. But I have always been very, very clear about my position with regards to the law. And Tamika and I, she's a dear friend of mine. We've been doing this for many years. I don't care about the law. I just don't. I just don't. And she reminds me that you have to care about the law because the law is what governs us. I got you. I got you. The intellectual grown-up side of me has you, and trust me, I get it. Like, I get it. But the emotional common sense side of me is like, come on, man. Really? Really? We really taking the right away from people to control what happens to themselves? And okay, it's the law, but that's just not right, man. That's just not right. However, there are those who feel just as adamant on the other side of the debate as I do on this side of the debate. On this side of the debate, it's not cool. You cannot take the rights away from people. It's about the choice. And Tamika, I'm glad you clarified earlier when you said that the Supreme Court didn't say that abortion is legal or illegal. They didn't make that determination. The determination they made is we ain't got nothing to do with it. It's up to y'all. Y'all decide. Y'all being states, right? So I dig that. But there are some who are pro-life who feel as though those of us pro-choice folks got it wrong, just like we feel like they got it wrong. Is it something that is worthy of debate? Well, let me take that back. Let me say it a different way. Are we correct in throwing fire bombs at each other for disagreement? And I think that many times when those of us in the middle / the left, because I'm a left-leaning independent, I often will find myself debating folks that are conservative, that are on the right side, and it gets pretty contentious. And I'm finding that these conversations with specifics to this one has grown to be pretty contentious. So I'd like to know, how are we to deal with it when we have something that is as polarizing as this? How do we deal with our peers and our loved ones who may disagree? Because I would guess that there are conversations around dinner tables all around the country that have become very, very challenging, contentious, and maybe have caused some hurt feelings. And so, Steph, I want you to address this first. Tamika, I want you to follow.
So, first of all, you talked about how we deal with things interculturally, how we interculturally, how we engage with one another, right? And what we're saying to one another, how we react to a difference of opinion. I think with this particular discussion, what's difficult is this difference of opinion is so personal because of how it impacts someone's direct life. And I think that the people on one side are legitimately asking, Marcus J., how will your life be impacted if I decide I don't want to be pregnant? Not everybody else, but how will your life be impacted if Steph B decides that she does not want to be pregnant? And I think that is the kind of question that should make anybody on any side of any argument, if it is something that has to do with you, with your body. And, let's put it this way. When we had the conversation surrounding masks throughout the pandemic, the big argument was my body. I don't have to wear a mask. Just stay out of my way. Don't tell me what to do. And it didn't make sense, because truly we knew that COVID was contagious and deadly. Why is it so difficult for people to understand that having being pregnant is not something that is an impactful condition for every single one of us? It is individual for each one of the people that are dealing with it. I think that would be a perfect place to start. But since we're not going to, right, at the end of the day, people are not going to stop asserting their opinions, especially now that they feel that they've won something here. I think within our community, we have so many elements of things and so many topics of and things going on, that when we disagree so viscerally on things like this, it feels painful. If we're being very honest, it feels painful. It feels painful to sit across from a Black Republican who voted for Trump, because he or she is going to be an outlier in the community. And as soon as we're faced with outliers, we behave a certain way. And that way isn't always positive. And it isn't always non-combative. Roe is going to be combative. It's always been a combative conversation. It's going to continue to be a combative conversation. This is not one of those things, unfortunately, Marcus, where you can just kind of say, well, I have an opinion about it, and I just want to say my opinion. When you do, you have to understand that your opinion about this particular matter could be detrimental or deadly to a certain sector of people. So they're going to react very aggressively in that way. You're saying to some women, now you could say on one level, I believe that, I am anti-choice because I believe that everybody has a right to live. I believe that children are children the minute they are conceived, although you can't cover them with insurance, and you can't, you can't sue somebody if they push you down. And I mean, it's been proven in court. They'll say, well, fetus wasn't viable. This person, didn't kill the fetus. They killed the mother. You've seen these things. Once we start having these real conversations, I think it behooves us, particularly in the Black community, to do one very important thing. Listen. It's to listen, but it's also to know not to come out and grab your bomb and throw it and run away. Because when those things happen, you're telling the individuals that you said it to that you didn't care about them. You just came out to troll a little bit. And this is one of those topics that trolling just isn't healthy. It can kill people. If Serena Williams almost died in childbirth, imagine what a poor Black woman goes through. So you have to understand that sometimes when you come with your opinion, it's going to be this heated. Do I think it should be treated with grace? Absolutely. But then I think there are people who followed Malcolm and some people who followed Martin. And in this case, you are going to have your Malcolms who come with the firebomb and who want to blow you up because your opinion feels detrimental to them. And let's be clear, Marcus. Those firebombs have more likely come from the right. You have people dead, doctors, who were providing access to care from Dr. Tiller forward, who have been blown up, who have been shot, who have been killed. And so now we feel like it's problematic for people to have to be very vocal about their opinions on the other side. it's an interesting thing to me. I do think we owe each other grace. Often in this community, we don't offer it to one another and we don't do it. I think this is one of those things that when you speak on it, you're speaking on what some people perceive as life or death for themselves. And when you say, I don't care if you die and I don't care about your opinion of it, you often open yourself up to whatever it's going to be, because it's going to be just that visceral for someone else. This isn't just being nice to one another in the community. This is being concerned about the outcomes that people within your community experience. So you're just as deadly when you're on the side of the argument, even if you're being attacked, when you're on the side of the argument that is the so-called right to life.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. In my style, Marcus J, live from our home dens of Legacy Internet Radio. Let me get a couple of comments in, Tamika, and then I want you to make your point. Laurel says, such a good point. How does this personally affect me? Which I kind of think about that often before I speak. You know, how does this affect me? Does it affect me? Does it not? Doesn't mean that I don't have an opinion, but it does speak to how strongly I make my opinion. And I often would like to defer to those who are affected. And I'd like to know what they think about it, because ultimately they are the ones whose opinions matter, certainly more than mine would. And, you know, so I like the fact that you said that, Laurel. Thank you for watching and listening and participating with us tonight. And then Ernest says, yes, they deflected to the states. It's almost the same way the federal government approached segregation and slavery at a point, which is funny. You know, I'll make this quick point to kind of piggyback on what Ernest is saying, and then Tamika, I'll give the comment back to you. But, you know, this is, you know, I think it was you, Tamika, earlier who alluded to, you know, giving it back to the states. And we know there's precedent there. I mean, that's what slavery was all about. It's about states' rights. It's about the states having a right to determine if we get to be slaves in this country. And, you know, the great emancipator Lincoln decided that he was going to free the slaves, not because it was the right thing to do, but it was strategically sound to help him win the war. That's what that was about. So, you know, I think we should keep that in mind when we start talking about giving the states the rights. There are times when the federal government has to be the parent here and say, this is the way we need to do it, because y'all gonna fuck this up. You know what I'm saying? And it looks like,
that's a good point.
Yeah, you know, because the reality is you got 13 states on Friday who had trigger laws. And you know what I'm saying? And so when you look at the map, depending on how long it takes for these trigger laws to go in effect in states who actually have the time it takes to enact their own laws, and a year from now, when we talk about a woman who was raped in a state that does not have the legal authority to allow her to have an abortion, and she wants to maybe travel across the state lines, how many states does she have to go? How far does she have to go? You know, I saw a meme today, Tamika. The meme says, I love to go camping, and I would drive you across state lines to take you camping, and I will let you ride in the car with me. And on the whole way back, I won't ask you nothing about camping. And we know that the meme was not speaking
about
camping.
Yes, it is. It's about camping or going on a fishing trip or a girls' trip. I mean, we women, we support each other. Yes, we support each other, and we will do what we need to do to support each other as women to make sure that we are taking care of.
Clearly you're keeping with the analogy, but keeping it all the way funky. This is the shit y'all ain't got to do. Shouldn't have to. Shouldn't have to do all that.
No.
You shouldn't have to do all of that. You know, I'm of the opinion, and when I talk about choice, I might get some heat for this. I don't care. 804-402-2893, because when you go online and you say the things that you say, or if you come on a show, you say the things that you say, you gotta own it. You gotta own it, and whatever comes with that, you gotta own it. And
that's the point I was making, Marcus.
I'm gonna say, let me make this point, and then you come back to it. I'm gonna say this. You know, whatever the reason a woman decides to have an abortion should not have anything to do with anyone with a penis. It has nothing to do with anyone with a penis. Period. It's her. If she decides, you know what, I just don't want to have a baby, That should be enough. We shouldn't even be talking about the trauma reasons that she's pregnant. Like, obviously, those are reasons that she should have her choice. But her choice comes all the way down to, you know what? I'm at a stage in my life, this isn't for me. And that should be enough, in my opinion, for her to make a choice for her body and her life. You know? And I don't know what's hard about that. Why is that hard? Why hard? Why is it hard? Why is it hard for a dude who often, when we're talking about stereotypes, the stereotypical dude who finds out she's pregnant and disappears? Y'all had sex together. She didn't have sex by herself. She didn't rape him and steal his sperm. We had sex together. So now all of a sudden, he gets to be the one that says, I'm out. And now he's out. He's decided he gone. He ain't doing nothing. But now she has to be the one to bear the brunt by herself. Because this fucking dude decides he don't want to stand up to his responsibility. She got to handle that by herself. She can't make a choice to decide what's right for her life and her body and her future. Come on, man. This is when I talk about how I don't care about the law for real. I know I'm governed by it. I got to do what I got to do when it comes to the law. I respect it because I don't want to go to jail. I can dig it. But the law is fucked up, man. It just is. It just is. In some cases, the law is just real messed up. Tamika, you got the con. I had to go on that rant. And I'm sorry, Steph, you wanted to stop me.
I'll wait until Tamika.
Well, okay. Let's be clear, right? First, let me go back because I think Laurel had a question where she was like, so we're at the mercy of whether Congress will get their act together and move on this. Yes, we are.
Yeah.
You are at the mercy of your legislators to make acts on codifying Roe for your particular state. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So start putting the pressure on because these local representatives may have to run every 2 years, right? Your congressmen have to run every 2 years as opposed to every 4 to 6 years. So yeah, turn up the heat on them and let them know your job is not guaranteed if you're not going to do the will of the people. But I digress from that. So let's be clear, Marcus, right? Because we argue all the time about the law. The law doesn't necessarily give men in particular the right to say, you know, that they want women to have children. Let's just be clear about that. Men, yes, because most of the reps are men. But let me see. How can we say this? This goes back to the old argument of quality of life versus a right to life, right? Should somebody have a child or be forced to have a child, especially if you know there's going to be defects or whatever else? You have a whole set of the population that's like, well, any life is precious, so it should all be born and they should have a chance, even if they only live for 3 days. Then that's just 3 days, right? But you're not thinking about that mother that has carried that child for 9 months. Now she's delivered the child and now she has to bury her child within 3 days. Right? So what kind of quality of life really was that for the child? And now we're having to deal with the repercussions for mom. Then you have a subsect of the population that's like, well, if you don't want the baby, you can have the baby and put it up for adoption. Can you now? There's about 450,000 kids in foster care right now. Right? You're talking about putting children in a system that is already overworked, overstressed, and highly underfunded. And then when you're putting these kids in that system, you are leaving them to the mercy of people who have signed up to host these children and whether or not they've done it for legitimate reasons. The horror stories that come along with the foster care system are real. And now you're subjecting a child to be spending the majority of their life living in a backpack, traveling from house to house to house because somebody felt that the fact that they're even living should outweigh the circumstances under which they would be living. Right? And so who who has the authority and who should be making that decision? Because if you're not standing in line to start getting these kids, if you're not making money to fund this foster care system, if you are not trying to become a foster parent, then really you shouldn't be saying, well, there are other options. Adoptions are expensive.
Yes.
You know, $10,000 to $25,000 per adoption. The process is long. It's hard. On the flip side of it, if you have a situation where you have a mom who's decided to keep this child, there are some states now they're like, well, you can go after the dad for child support and you can go after for pregnancy costs. Okay, so now you're encouraging these parents to get involved in the legal system, drag this other parent through the legal system if they have the money to do that. And that's starting pretty much as soon as the child is an infant. So again, now you are purposefully creating contention and, you know, legal discourse between the two birth parents of this child. My favorite, though, is the argument of the men that say, that's half my seed too. I should be able to make a decision as to whether I want this seed to be born.
Oh, you've been talking to the hoteps.
Right? I helped create this life. Half of that is part of me, and I want you to have this baby. Really? Do you now? Right? Because I didn't agree. I may have been a willing participant in having sex, but I was not a willing participant in wanting to conceive a child. And this is very ironic, right? Because I can use myself as a personal example. When I found out that I was having my first child, in that situation, I was under the care of a Black female OBGYN. And after she tormented me and I made her run the tests like in many different ways, because I just knew that she was lying, and she told me that I was having a kid, the very next question that she asked of me was, do I want to keep it? That was interesting. Now I'm grown. I'm not some child. I am grown with a very good state job, with a career, with everything else. Do you want to keep this baby? That's an interesting question. You just told me I was pregnant 5 minutes ago, and now you're asking me if I want to keep it, as if I can make that decision in 5 minutes, right? Fast forward 5 years. Now I'm pregnant with little man. I'm married, pregnant with little man. My husband is not in the room when I'm having this conversation with the OBGYN, who looks at me and goes, oh, congratulations, you're having a baby. Do you want to keep it? And in that instance, now I'm under the care of a white female OBGYN. So that leads me to question, are you asking these questions of all of your patients or some of your patients? And then the ones that you are asking this question of, how do you pick and choose who you're asking this question for? Because other people that I have talked to have not experienced that.
Yeah, I was young when I had both of my children and no one asked me that.
Right. See what I mean?
I do think it's about location somewhat too, right? You made some really salient points I'd love to jump in on if that's okay.
Yes.
You know, since this whole thing came down, and there's an element of it too where I'm outside of natural childbirthing years according to the charts, although I will tell you those charts were not based on Black women. Black women do not have advanced maternal health issues. They have healthcare issues, totally different. So Black women tend to birth and deliver children well later in life. Those charts and everything else came from studies that were not as difficult and taxing, that were done predominantly on white women, right? So when they talk about having babies later in life being dangerous and detrimental, most of those studies were not done looking at the success that Black women have having children later in life, which also impacts why they ask some of those questions. Because some of the assumptions are, one, you're young, you're incapable, and two, if you don't do it now, but that's not really as relevant for Black women. Black women successfully actually have multiples, meaning the potential of Black women having multiple births, twins, post 35 is much higher. Successfully. So sometimes when they're asking, looking at a BMI chart, it doesn't relate to my body. It was done on the basis of a white woman that's 5'2" and 100 pounds, and they've now deemed that that's what we all should look like. And now I have to walk around hating my Black body on the basis of it. That a lot of this is coming from that, and that miseducation has seeped into our communities. So when you have those men, that are going on and on about their seed and so on and so forth, while also being very comfortable with the idea that they don't have to be with this woman. They're also comfortable and knowing that if things don't work out with her and the sense of how they engage and get along, they can walk away without repercussion. And so I would ask people, would you be comfortable with a trigger law that now holds men accountable? So we go back to, great, Roe is what it is right now. Would you be comfortable with a state like New York, which is socially liberal, if they enacted what I would call, we'll go off of Herman Cain, we'll call it the 2-2-2 plan. And Marcus, you can speak up on this. You're a man, right? So the plan is that if a woman,
Yes, ma'am.
you are a man. If a woman is pregnant and she's seeking an abortion, but she no longer can get that abortion, according to federal law, unless she's in a state that allows it. If she is pregnant, or forget that, if a man is out there and he has 2 children outside the religious structure of marriage, because that's what's pushing these laws, is for the people who are fighting now is religion. If he has 2 children outside marriage, if he is $2,000 outside and in arrears on child support, and if he is 2 months behind on child support, we can now mandate a vasectomy for this individual. Because what we don't want is for him to go out and make more children that are going to be under supported by the familial system that conservatives say is so necessary, and that is breaking down and falling apart. You see, you laugh at this, but the truth of the matter is all of the downside, all of the impact and effect is happening to the women who now have to withstand these laws that are mandating and forcing pregnancy for people who may not want it. So therefore, since we now need to go ahead and acknowledge that men are a part of this, nobody here is Mary. No one had an immaculate conception. And if you don't believe religiously, you don't believe that anyway. So if we don't believe that these women have created these issues alone, we must now hold men accountable. So we enact a trigger law. They would never go for this. They would never go for a trigger law.
For two reasons. One, the Supreme Court has already outlawed forced sterilization.
Absolutely.
So stare decisis, right? It's legal precedent that the states can't enact laws to try to force sterilization on a particular group of people.
And that's why I bring it up. And thank you.
Yeah.
So we can't.
I think that I see where you're going, and I think there needs to be creativity with regards to holding men accountable. Let me get some comments in, and I'll address that more directly. Laurel said that she had been asked a question about do you want to have a baby, but she said she thinks it was because of her age, and I respect that. Our sister Shayna Latia, Legacy Internet Radio alumni and a dear friend of mine.
Hey girl, hey.
She says, "Girl, I just waited on a woman that had a boy at 51 naturally." Wow.
Yeah. And it's not uncommon. It's not uncommon. So, Marcus, do you think there's an issue with? Well, first, just the one thing.
So, if you want to ask me directly, what do you want to ask me directly?
So, would you have a problem with a state-based legislator running on a platform that enacts certain triggers? at a state level and then wanting to challenge it, because you can still, Tamika will attest to this, you can still sponsor a bill.
Mhm.
You can still sponsor a bill that says, listen, these are the other things that happen. And if a woman goes to the doctor and she states, I'm pregnant and I don't have a partner, then immediately, well, who got you pregnant? Now we start doing the backlog work. Would you be okay with that?
Yeah,
Also,
no, I wouldn't.
mandatory immediately enacted child support at conception.
That I would be okay with. I wouldn't be okay with.
Ooh.
I wouldn't be okay with forcing a man into a vasectomy any more than I would be in taking the choice away from a woman from having an abortion.
And that's
It's a
all my
choice.
point is.
It's a choice. Choice. So you can't enact a law that tells me what I need to do with my body. I got a problem with that, whether I'm a man or a woman.
Well, we
I got a problem
can.
with that.
We can.
Well,
That's
obviously, but you
yeah,
asked
and
me
that's
my
what
opinion,
we've been
and
to
I've
see.
been very clear and open about how I got a problem with what just happened on Friday. So there's my
Absolutely.
consistency. But
Absolutely.
as far as the child support thing, if if we can determine that you, sir, are the father, then yeah. However, you are held accountable for that. If it's financial, or I mean, if you're married, or if or if she says, "Hey, he's here with me," or however that look. I never had a problem with the child support system. I got a problem with the men who run from it. I have a problem with the men who do the best they can to avoid their responsibility. I got
And
a
have a
problem with I got a problem with the women who work the child support system to get what they want. You see what I'm saying? And so the child support system is flawed in a lot of different ways. But if we were to find a fair way to financially hold accountable an unmarried man who has fathered a child with an unmarried woman, absolutely, I got no problem with that. No, yeah, you
and I
can't.
guess
Yeah, I don't want you tinkering with his body any more than I want you to keep her from being able to make a choice for her body. But if we're talking about responsibility, because see, at the end of the day, if we're going to tell America you cannot have an abortion, you're gonna have children being born, and somebody's got to take care of them, and it needs to be the father just as equally as it is the mother,
I also
especially
think
in
it
a
needs to
way
be
with
the state, Marcus.
the state.
I do. I think if the federal government and then the state by trigger is going to force a woman to have a baby that she knows she cannot take care of, because let's be real, it's not that everybody is having abortions because it's an elective and desired. Some women have to. A DNC as well as a DNE follow many situations. Babies that die in utero and things like that. That follows. Now, for the women who are electing because it is their right and they don't want to have a child, if the state and the federal government is going to force it on them, I think the state and federal government should then be in agreement that they're willing to carry a level of responsibility for this life since they felt it needed to be here. We've gotten very comfortable with the idea. These are the same people that don't want free lunch in schools. The same party that votes against free lunch consistently, might I add, not just at the federal level, the state level. The same party that are trying to steer funds from public schools into exclusive charter schools that get to determine who gets the education, want these children here with no thought. The same party that has decided that whether or I will say has co-signed on one of the wealthiest countries in America having the highest rate of child poverty and child hunger is now mandating that there be pregnancies. So what I say is any state, the federal government should make a law that says any state, since we've now enacted this, since Jenny's husband has now enacted this craziness, we should be able to go back and say, as a state, great, when that happens, the true trigger law is we now will give any woman who is having a pregnancy that she requested or asked for or did not want to have. She requested an abortion. We now agree that we're going to provide her with the things she does not have for this child. Because apparently we don't know when women are capable. We don't believe women who say, I'm not capable of doing this. So if you're going to force them to do it, the state should be forced. And that means the people of the state, even the people of the state who are pro-life, you now should be forced into whatever it is, small business taxes being donated to it, whatever it is. And if you can't agree with that, then you know that this argument is one you should step out of.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that in principle. Tamika, let me make this point, then you got the rest of it. Harry says, excellent show, highly educational. Thank you from Minneapolis. Laurel says, can we talk for a minute about enforcing Christian law and separation between church and state? Sue says they are forcing births and they can't feed them. Here's what I'll say, and I'll say this real quick, and Tamika, I'll throw it back to you. You know, we talk about as men and dudes, brothers, fellas, y'all finna be real mad at me. But and I'm gonna speak very, very freely and comfortably and borderline crass to kind of make a point, right? Brothers, y'all want to smash. You want to smash. And when you smash, you might knock her up. And when you knock her up, you can't disappear. You can't run away. It's a responsibility. Every single time you have sex, it's a responsibility that you might have a baby. You just might. And it is not her fault that y'all conceived. It's not her responsibility to make sure that a baby doesn't come. And it's not her sole responsibility to take care of it. As a man, that's the part that I just have a lot of issue with my brethren with. Because this whole thing, when you have, people who say things openly and directly about how it's about pro-life, but you're a dude. You're a dude. Like I get that's how you feel, but you're a dude who wants to smash. And so, but you also don't want to take care of the kid. And you also don't want her to have an abortion. So what's she supposed to do? You know what I'm saying? Like, what's she supposed to do? So I got a problem
to struggle.
with that on that level. And I'm a man. I've been in these conversations at 48 years old. I've evolved to this point. I've always been a person who feels that a woman has a right to choose, but it's a different thing when you know, and when you see and you understand. Come on, man. Take care of your kids, man. That's at the end of the day, for a man, if you are someone who says I'm pro-life and you disappear when you smash and knock her up, you are the worst scum of this earth. Period. Let's see. One more comment. Sue says America receiving baby formula from Germany, but they want you to not be able to have the choice to have your own future in your hand. Tamika, you got the con. I'm sorry I took so long, but I need to
No,
get
you're
that off.
fine.
You got,
You're fine. But spinning off of what Steph was saying, it's interesting. And I've always thought that people that are staunch pro-lifers really ought to be full supporters of social entitlement type things going on, right? Because if you're like, we are so pro-life and everybody needs to live and everybody deserves a chance, right? So pro-life is saying every life deserves a chance. Well, every life isn't going to get a chance if they're hungry, right? If there's not enough money to eat and to live off of and to do this and to do that, right? So it's very interesting that your pro-lifers are the very ones that are, like Steph saying, voting against free lunch and letting the children eat, right? A good meal, not just a brown bag. Here's a sandwich and an apple, have a day. And things like TANF and SNAP, I think they call those food. I grew up, they were food stamps, but I guess they call it SNAP now. And, different types of welfare. Those very people are like, you're too lazy. You need to get out and work. Well, I can't work because now you've made me have this baby that I didn't want to have. And daycare is $1,000 a month alone. right? Just daycare for an infant is $1,000 a month.
My
Not to
goodness.
mention the lack of formula that we can't have right now to feed these kids. So you're expecting me to breastfeed, which is a whole nother issue with work. You don't provide me the proper accommodations to be able to do that. I have
And
to
they
fight
don't
for
want to
space.
mandate that.
Right. I have to go pump in the bathroom because that's where you want me to go, and I can only do it on my 15-minute breaks every 4 hours, right? Because I
And
can't
that's if
interrupt
you
time.
don't work in a place like fast food. You know,
Right.
we speak about this, and I think, Tamika, I can say this for both of us. We speak about this as women who have had professional careers.
Mhm.
That is not the majority of America. A
Mm-mm.
lot of America is powered through a blue collar cycle. It is a blue collar engine, right? And much of America's women are working class women. And and ironically lower working class in many of the states that are having these triggering laws.
Mhm.
So it's shocking to me that we just can't see that this is very irrational, you know. And I don't want to miss what Lauren is talking about in relationships. Since you're here, let's talk a little bit about separation of church and state.
Mhm.
You know, when you look at the ideology of the separation of church and state, you have many of the signers of the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, making very clear statements that church and state should be separate. That was the fundamentals of them coming here to colonize this country, was to be able to have freedom of religion. Freedom of religion means any religion. It means I can practice Judaism. It means I can be Muslim. I can be Christian. I can be an atheist. I can be religion free if I so choose. And the fact that one religious dogma or doctrine is pushing states' rights and also pushing federal law, but worse, has creeped into the Supreme Court at a level that where they are no longer whispering about it and then begrudgingly passing these laws that they need to. What they're actually doing now is making arguments that have a religious taint to them. What has happened to the separation of church and state? And do we really have a true argument there from your legal standpoint?
So this is interesting. I don't think that you can ever really have a true and hard line of separation from church and state, because a lot of the laws that have been enacted are based on or carried over from religious law. They're carried over from common law, which comes from religious law, right? Can't kill, thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal, adultery, right? Those are things that you find are against the law in your religious texts, whether it's, Islam, Christianity, or so forth. And they've just kind of carried on into regular common law, and then they've just done that, right? So most of the morals and values, the moral laws, so to speak, are going to be your laws that come out from that. So to say that there's a separation of church and state, yes, to the fact that there is not a Church of America, like there was a Church of England, like the Vatican, right? There's not a separation of church and state when you're dealing with the Vatican, because the Vatican is the state and they're making the laws. And, you follow those particular rules and constructs of that particular thing. We don't have that here in America. So to that sense, yes, there is a separation of church and state. However, you have to understand that you are electing people who have certain morals and values. And a lot of the times, those morals and values will guide their decisions. Now, is it supposed to happen in the judiciary? No, you're supposed to be able to separate your individual ideologies and apply the rule of law in an unbiased nature so as to make fair decisions across the board. Does that happen? Some of the time. Does it not happen? Some of the time. And so I don't think that you can truly separate that from a person, because that's just inherently who they are. So the question of whether some of these justices that got recently appointed, be it Kavanaugh and Gorsuch or well, we already know Amy Coney Barrett because she just came out from the get-go and was like,
And she's
I am
part of the Quiver
staunchly,
movement.
yeah. She came out from the very beginning and was like, this is my stance, this is how I feel about it.
Right.
But whether or not they actually lied during their confirmation hearings when they were saying, no, I believe in stare decisis, and I think that Roe is the rule of law, and that's how it is. They may not have lied. I am slow to accuse a judiciary person or whatever, or whomever it is, for lying in a confirmation hearing without full facts about that. But what I can say is that maybe based on the information that they got during these arguments, because we weren't there privy to the arguments, things that they did in research or whatever else, for whatever reason, they have changed their mind. And that is also a piece of stare decisis and precedent. See, if the Supreme Court always had to go off of what they have already ruled, and that's that they weren't allowed to change their mind, we would have problems because you wouldn't have had the Board of Education overturning Plessy v. Ferguson, right? You wouldn't have these types of things going on. So they need to have the freedom to change. And let's be clear, these federal judicial officers are appointed per a particular presidency, and that particular president has some type of faith-based bias one way or the other, right? Your Reagans, your Bushes, they were tightly wound with the evangelicals. You would see John Hagee, you would see Jerry Falwell, you would see Pat Robertson, you would see them intertwined in them so much, and that's kind of where they were. So it's always going to be a guiding principle. Now, whether or not the court is creating Christian law to be law of the land, I mean, arguably yes, arguably no. I'm not really sure how to separate the two, because now you're talking about separating a person from themselves.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Let's get this. I want to get this comment.
I love this comment.
I want to get you see the comment.
Laurel's comment. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
I want Laurel to come back, Marcus.
Let's read this comment, and we'll all address it. Even Sharia law and Jewish law does not support this ruling, so it's kind of a made-up thing. The right-wing Christians that they ran away with is apolitical football. It's based on nothing. It's like a damn Seinfeld show.
First of all, Seinfeld is a great show about nothing.
Yeah.
That's a dumbass show. Seinfeld was dumb as fuck. Let's keep it funky. That's a dumbass show.
Let's be clear about one thing with Christianity, right? There's a major piece of Christianity I think people are not recognizing, or they're just choosing to overlook. Yeah. The Christian principle and the thing about God and Jesus has always been free will, right? That's the underlying theme across the Bible, from Genesis to Revelations. The God has always given you free will. He said, hey, these are the rules. But if you choose to not follow the rules, and you choose to do your own thing, that's your choice. There's repercussions later, but that's still your choice. So if you're really following the true Christian principles here, and you're really trying to walk in Jesus' shoes and do the right thing, then the people need to have the ability to make a choice. Now, that's where the Supreme Court is saying, well, we are letting the people make a choice. We're bouncing it back to the states, and the people can make a choice through their elected representative.
Right. That's what they do.
That's what they've done. So,
I agree with what you're saying, but Laurel's absolutely right.
Oh, absolutely.
And this is more of smoke and mirrors than anything else. It is a control mechanism. I think there's also an element, I'm Marcus, I'm never a conspiracy person, but there is an element in what we have to understand here. It's not only preserving white life so that the voting pool starts to become whiter and reverses the browning of America, because there's part of that, but it is also that this is a machine that needs feeding. And poor people having babies feeds the machine, because it is likely that most of those children will just become the next cycle of poor people that feed the machine.
Mhm.
If you start to give poor people an opportunity, and that's who this really impacts significantly, poor and marginalized women.
Mhm.
If you start to give them a decision that now is not the time, I'm trying to pull my life together, I'm trying to go to college, I'm trying to pull myself up by my bootstraps, and then you come along and say, well, bootstraps be damned, we're going to clip those, make it a little bit harder, force you to have a baby that you don't want, can't provide for, potentially make you have to detour. You now can't go to college because, by the way, we also don't want to make that accessible. We need these people to feed the system, the
Mhm.
hamster wheel of poverty. We need it.
Mhm.
You know what's
It's true.
crazy, right?
And when I
The
say
way
we,
that
not
you,
me, the rich people, because it ain't me.
the way
I
you
don't have
laid it
it
out,
like
though, the way you laid it out, Steph, is such a clear example of the machine that is America, that's built upon the oppression of its own people. And there's a lot of people in this country that just won't co-sign that. And it's unfortunate because it's what it is. It's how we do it here. Like there are many, many vehicles that are designed to keep us separated and keep us oppressed and keep us from being able to progress, and this is one of them. Let me address the religion thing, because I'm not someone that is governed by it. I'm not governed by religion. I'm not a religious person. I'm not a Christian. I'm not a Jewish. I'm not a Muslim. I'm not any of that stuff. I'm an agnostic who just happens to be someone who views right and wrong as innate. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're not born assholes. Asshole is learned behavior. We're born with an innate ability to understand. Don't take shit from people. Don't smash another dude's lady. Don't kill nobody. You know what I'm saying? Be nice to your mama. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's certain shit that you're supposed to just come here and it's supposed to be innate. Like, if you got a decent mama and a decent daddy, you know certain things. You grow up in here with certain things.
agreed.
You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So when you look at how religion takes that away, it just I don't want to make this about religion. At least not me. Maybe we can do that another. I don't want to make this about religion, but I agree that religion is a big, big, big hand in this pot. A huge hand in this pot, because you got people walking around, instead of saying what's paramount is an individual human who happens to be a woman should have the right to decide what happens with her body. We turn that around and we say, because I feel that my religion says that we shouldn't do this, nobody can do this. And I'm just not okay with that. I'm not
That's
okay
an
with that level
excellent
of
point,
oppression.
Marcus.
That's
And
oppression to me. That's oppression to me, because what if I'm an asshole that says fuck your religion?
And
Like,
you
well,
have a right to
you
say
know what
that.
I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
hold on, let me finish this point. I say that harshly. Y'all know my heart. Y'all know I don't feel that way, but I say it that way because there are those who feel that way. Do they not get to have an opinion? Do they not get to be someone who decides what happens with their bodies? Because they say, fuck your religion. I'm not doing what is in your book. I'm doing what's right for my body. But you know what? Now, all of a sudden, based upon your religion, we're making laws that keep me from being able to do what I need to do for me, when science has allowed me and allow others before me to do X, Y, and Z. It's for me. That's why all this is outrageous. That's why it's outrageous. And when I look at how religion can control people who are not governed by religion, I ain't governed by no religion. I ain't governed by no religion, y'all. I'm not. But apparently I am, especially if I'm a woman, because this was driven by religious doctrine. And I got a
Yes.
problem with that, man. I'm always going to
Right.
have a problem with that. I'm always going to be somebody that says, as an individual, you
Right.
have the right to be whatever you want to be. And, I feel like we're going to be having this conversation again in a few months, maybe in a few years, when we talk
On
about
something
LGBTQ,
Right.
because Clarence Tyrant said in his own statement, and he was the only one, none of his homies co-signed his bullshit. But he was like, yeah, maybe we need to talk about that shit too. You know?
Well,
You
Say
know
it
what
like
I'm saying? So this is why this is bigger. This is
Yes.
bigger
Yes. But
than
you know,
any of what we're talking about tonight.
but
But
Marcus,
that's
does it
go ahead.
have to be bigger though? You know what I mean? Like it shouldn't even need to be. And I everything you said with cosign, brother, everything. But it's almost disgusting that we have to hinge this and say this might impact this later. This is impacting this right now. This is significant right now. And to your point, one of the newscasters on the Young Turks was basically saying the same thing. She was like, I'm not religious. I'm atheist. I don't care about your Bible. I don't care about Jesus. I don't care about any of that. And you know, the irony of that is we are a country that more than one time has gone to war and created laws right here in this country against people that we see as religious zealots. And yet we continue to co-sign on Christian zealots. We co-sign on Christian zealotry and the behavior that it pushes. The people who used to show up at a soldiers, a church that used to show up at the soldiers' funerals, protesting them and calling them all, you know, warmongers and baby killers. The Christian people that show up every week to harass women that are going to Planned Parenthood and may not be getting an abortion. Planned Parenthood has an entire wealth of services that they offer. The abortion really being the least of them, contraception being the highest. You know, and so we're allowing our own Christian zealots, our own Christian bigots, to perform and behave in a way that if they were Jewish or Muslim, particularly Muslim, this country would be up in arms. We literally have gone into countries angry that women aren't allowed to drive and women aren't allowed to walk around uncovered, that they must wear hijab and only allow their eyes to be uncovered. We have gone on this on this moral high ground that we're not living up to. We look at those countries, we judge particularly brown leaning countries, not Pakistan, Palestine. Look at how we view the Palestinians because we are a country that is Zionist, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. Look at how we view Zionists, the Palestinians, and the way that they manage their country. Nobody there is crying oppression. No one is there. But some of the reason that we co-sign on the things that are done to them is because they are brown and they practice a certain religion. We are allowing a certain religious movement here to have the same amount of pull, of command, of mandate over the lives of everyone, and we're okay with it. I don't understand it. And I don't understand that as someone who would not, in the moment, choose abortion as my option. It means nothing for Tamika. Absolutely nothing. It's kind of like a myrrh. My opinion of abortion for me is unrelated to what Tamika wants to do. I'm borrowing that from my brother Marcus.
Ain't no have Steppin Mark
But
today, live from New Den Legacy Internet Radio. As we move towards the close here tonight, I will start by saying that I'm just so thankful for having you two a part of my circle, my family, a part of what we do here. Largely because just real talk, y'all a couple of real dope people. And I like you. I like you. And I appreciate this exchange, you know, because I gained so much from listening to you guys and from sharing with you guys. With me, you know, obviously being a man and seeing the situation that happened with the overturning of Roe versus Wade. You know, I have what I think about it, but you know, it's one of those things that we are taught to defer to those who may know more about a situation than we do. And as a man, I understand and acknowledge that I don't have a uterus. I can't have an abortion. And so while intellectually and socially I can have an opinion about what happened, I also understand that my opinion is not the predominant opinion that should dominate anything when it comes to this discussion. And I should only speak when my opinion is solicited. And so I thank you both for speaking with me and speaking with our viewers and our listeners and giving me grace to share what I think about this. I fancy myself an ally here, but I feel because of the relationship and the rapport that I've built with the two of you individually and as a team, had I not been an ally, you would give me the grace to understand an opinion, a difference of an opinion, and not give me no shit about it. Because I think there's a lot of people right now, whether it be in personal relationships and in social relationships and business relationships, there's a lot of discourse that is happening right now because of differences of opinion. This subject and this conversation is polarizing, and everybody feels strongly about it. And it is upsetting for me to see division come from our people in our community over social and uh, these kinds of topics. It's hurtful to me because I see the harm that it creates uh, holistically. And so I appreciate the grace that you all have given me. I'm going to shift us into the next phase of the conversation. But before I do that, I would like, you guys to whatever final statement you'd like to give on this topic uh, prior to us shifting into our moment in Black history, our rants and our closings and our missing child. So, Steph, I'd like for you to go first. If you have anything that you'd like to put a bow on, pardon the pun, with
I'm always
regards
in for a
to,
bow. Absolutely.
pardon the pun, regards to the topic that we spent the last amount of time on. Tamika, you will follow her if you would do that for us. And then when Tamika's finished speaking, I will take us to a close with our moment in Black history, our missing child, and I'll lead us our answer and our closing. Steph, final word on the topic.
All right. Thank you. Um, you know, at the end of the day, what I do think people need to understand is that this isn't a moral conversation. This is a medical discussion. And so much of the medical nature of it is not discussed, is not understood, and it's left out. It's we are approaching this from a place that I believe um, becomes immediately argumentative and irrational, and it tells me that the people who are so vociferously anti-choice and so comfortable lobbing statements and saying the things that they're saying, they don't take it as seriously as they should. Because if we're taking this as seriously as we should, we would recognize that we're now talking about maternal death. We're now talking about marginalized Black women and Black girls. We're now talking about, let's think about the irony of, I think back to how very specifically I was in a space and they kept playing R. Kelly music. And I was so bothered by it. I was like, can y'all stop? Like I literally was like, can we not? And I remember the person in that space saying, basically, come on, man, it's his music. It is what it is. R. Kelly was someone that in the courts, it was revealed, forced women to go and get abortions. The person that questioned me on how I felt about R. Kelly is supposedly pro-life. So it again shows that we pick and choose. It is like the Bible. We pick and choose. You're having premarital sex, but then you're pro-life, and there's no room for anything else. We've got to get to a point of where we understand that this really needs to stay in the conversation of true science spoken by scientists and true medicine spoken by medical professionals. And then at the end of it, true impact spoken by the people who truly are impacted. And if you don't fit in one of those three categories, really, and I think someone was a little bothered earlier when I said something about, married people speaking on singular dating habits. Well, you really, there's a certain point in life where you're just not the authority on something. You have an opinion, but you're not the authority. And I think we need to take that respectfully and say, again, if you are not a medical authority, a scientific authority, or an impacted party, then you cannot be an authority in the space of being pro-choice.
I can dig that. Ain't no how stepping. We're Marcus here live from our own mobile dens, our home dens of Legacy and that radio. Tamika, final point on the topic at hand, our legal. We appreciate you being here. Thank you for your insight. What's your final word on this topic?
Sure. To piggyback off Steph, it's important that when we're making these discussions that it's respectful, right? And it's okay for you to respectfully decline to make a statement with regards or take a stance with regards to whether you're pro-life or pro-choice or however you come down. But Marcus, reiterating what you had talked about earlier, we're seeing how this is such a polarizing topic, and people are so offended because they feel like they're being forced either into a religious construct, or on the polar opposite side, you have people that are trying to enforce a religious construct, and the behavior that is just coming out of people is so egregious and almost inhumane and really should just be unacceptable with how people are treating each other with regards to even discussing this. People are entitled to have their own opinions, and they're entitled to feel how they feel about it. Now, with that being said, which you had said something earlier, Marcus, about if you're going to put your feelings out there on the interweb and social media, then you need to be prepared for the backlash and the repercussions and the people that are going to come out and try to tell you that you have the wrong opinion and you're on the wrong side, and whatever may trickle down from that. But the whatever may trickle down for that still needs to be something that is still respectful and not harmful to people. For some reason, especially when it comes to this particular topic, if someone is saying something that we don't agree with, people are taking it way farther than what it needs to be taken, and they're starting to engage in harmful behavior towards that other person simply because they don't like that they're pro-life, or they don't like that they're pro-choice, or pro-abortion, generally speaking. And people, then you're subject to the cancel culture, right? Now we have to deal with, am I going to be part of the cancel culture? Should I say anything? Should I not say anything? And it's becoming a problem, especially within our community. It's becoming a problem. And you need people that are so quick to jump to the cancel culture. You also really need to watch and be careful how you're approaching the cancel culture, because in a lot of states, including Virginia, there are laws that can put you in jail or open you up to being subject to a civil suit where you get to pay that person 3 times the damages that they got at your hands, because you are so inclined to try to cancel them, and you take all of these egregious actions in order to do that. So we need to understand each other and be more humanistic about this and about this approach. This is a conversation that's never going to end. It's always going to be quality of life versus life at all. And we're never going to agree. on who should be right, who should be wrong. But I agree with Steph. If you don't fall into certain categories, sometimes your opinion is just not asked for. It's okay. It's okay to keep your opinion to yourself. It's okay. But if you decide not to keep your opinion to yourself, that's okay too. We do have a freedom of speech here. Like, we are allowed to share our opinions and say what we want to say without getting threatened, right? And threats on our lives and threats on our livelihoods. So I don't know where we made that turn at here in America, that seems that if you say something that somebody doesn't agree with, then the appropriate response is to go for the throat. I don't know where that seemed to have been okay, but I want people to take a step back and think about that and realize I could be opening myself up to slander, libel, criminal prosecution in Virginia, and having to pay somebody 3 times the damages that they did. And I can't afford that. I don't know if anybody else can. So I just say keep that in mind with what you're doing when you're out there doing that. Yeah.
I might put some on it. I put some on it.
Right. I borrow some from you.
I can dig it. Honestly, I think that we find ourselves in a situation where we think our opinion is the law, and whatever side of the argument we find ourselves on, that's the right argument. And we don't often allow for the open exchange of ideas. And I think that, America fancies itself a great country that allows that to happen. Yet we got a stalemate in Washington because blood and cuz can't get along. So, what you see on the ground in many communities, where you see differences of opinions create all kinds of turmoil, it ain't no different than what you see in Washington. And it's sad. It's sad when it's the people, but it's even more sad when it's my people. Has Steppin, Marcus J live from New Day and Legacy and that radio. All right, so let's move on to the final stage of this show, where we get into our moment in Black history and our missing children, and then we'll rant, we'll close, we'll get the hell out of here. All right, so on June 25th, 2009, I'll never forget, I was on my way home from work, and I turned on the radio, and they were talking about how a 50-year-old man in Los Angeles had a heart attack, and was unresponsive, and that 50-year-old man was later revealed to be Michael Jackson. And 13 years ago this week, we lost him. And it's a crazy, crazy, crazy thing. This will be the only moment in Black history that we'll do tonight, only because I haven't had an opportunity to talk about Michael Jackson in a long time. And I just want to talk about Michael Jackson. And, we lost him. And it's funny because I remember in the fall of 1979, the early part of 1980, one of us wasn't born yet because they're a millennial, on this show here tonight. And I remember riding in the car on the way to school. That was Shade. I remember riding in the car on the way to school and hearing my very, very, very first favorite song. It's called Rock With You. I'm 5 years old. And I'm like, man, that's dope. I didn't use that terminology because I'm 5 years old, but it's the sentiment. And it was my first favorite song. And I had been a fan of this man ever since. And I remember in 1984 when I'm 10 years old, and I remember going on a Victory tour, and I remember Cousin Terry was able to get the little booklet that you get, and I was mad. I'm still mad. It's been almost 40 years, and I'm still mad that she got the booklet because it had all the pictures of Michael and his brothers and stuff, and I never seen the booklet again. I was mad. Victory tour. And then I remember in 1987 when the greatest music video in the history of music ever came out, and it was called Bad, and it was Michael Jackson, and it had Wesley Snipes in it. And I remember all of the great memories that he gave us. And it just was a very, very, very humbling, sad day on June 25th, 2009, because he was gone. And, it's funny when you look at certain people in pop culture, or maybe even in your life, who are larger in life to you, and maybe to others, and you feel as though nothing can happen to them. I felt that way with my Nana. I just, she was 82 when she left us, but, I had it legit in my spirit that she was going to live forever. and it's unrealistic, but it kind of gives you the comfort that you need to be able to function. And I remember feeling that way about Michael Jackson. I remember calling Kate up on the phone, like, nah, I know it ain't real because you ain't seen it. He's like, bro, I'm looking at it. I'm like, fuck, it must be real. And it just was a very, very difficult thing. And yeah, I speak of Michael because that's who I want to talk about. But I know that there are other situations out there for other people who feel very, very moved by maybe someone in pop culture or maybe someone in your life who is that you have some loss for. So I just wanted to take tonight's show, and weren't planning on doing a show tonight, but here we are. And I look at the calendar, looked at the moment in Black history, and I saw that it was an opportunity for me to speak of one of my favorite musicians of all time, my favorite personalities of all time, and that would be Michael Joseph Jackson. So I would say, continue, my brother, to rest in peace. And thank you for all of the joy that you gave me starting back in 1979 in Jersey City, New Jersey, the 5-year-old kid on his way to Lutheran Parochial School, sitting in the backseat of his mama's Toyota Corolla. Ain't no how Steppin Marcus J live from New Den Legacy on the radio. Shout out to one of my favorite people in this town and in this world and in this life. You know her as the very, very, very successful career cheerleader. She is our sister Cara Presley, who is checking us out right now, and she is Legacy and a Radio alumni. And right now, she just put a comment in, and she is shouting out another one of our favorite people who is also Legacy Internet Radio alumni, our sister Rick Deans. So we appreciate both and both and both. And yeah, and she hears me, so she's commenting with the
Hey,
heart. So
Cara.
love you right back, and shout out to you, and shout out to Rick Deans as well. Ain't no outside with Marcus J live from New Den, like I said, in radio. All right, so here is time for my least favorite part of the show, where we get into our missing children. We got two. We're gonna go all the way down to Dinwiddie for the first one. Dinwiddie, for those folks who may not be familiar with Dinwiddie, it is south of us here and a tad south of Petersburg. So from the Richmond area, you're looking at about 30 to 40 miles away. We're looking for Quentin Perkins. He's been missing since June 21st. He's 13. He's 5'5". He's 126. He was last seen wearing blue jeans, purple shirt, gray tennis shoes. He requires medication, and he may be in the need of medical attention, I should say. If you have seen a young brother, Quentin Perkins, please contact National Center for Missing and or Exploited Children on their website, missingkids.org, or contact the Dinwiddie County Police Department at 804-469-3755. We are also today looking for Patricia Lewis, who's been missing since June 24th, 2022, from here in the Cap City, Henrico County. More specifically, she's a 15-year-old Black female. She's 5'2", 150. Last seen wearing black backpack. If you've seen Patricia Lewis, please contact the National Center for Missing and or Exploited Children on their website at missingkids.org, or contact the Henrico County Police Department at 804-501-5000. So let's recap. If you have seen Quentin Perkins out of Dinwiddie County here in Virginia, June 21st is his missing date. If you have seen Patricia Lewis, Henrico County, Richmond, Virginia area, June 24th is her missing date. If you've seen either of them, please contact the National Center for Missing and or Exploited Children and their website, missingkids.org, or contact them by phone at 1-800-THE-LOST, 1-800-843-5678. Ain't no hashtag with Marcus J. Live from New Den Legacy Internet Radio, but it's not New Den. That's me being caught up in the routine. Today, we're in our various home dens. All right, so here's where we get into our rants. Here's where we get into our closings. And here's where we send y'all on home. Our legal Tamika Robinson. Here's where you take your flowers from me. Every single time we have an opportunity to build and bond, it's a great day for me. I don't know how you feel about it, but I can tell you it's a great day for me. You bring so much to me personally and so much to us here on the show. So we appreciate you. I'm so proud of you. I give you that, Jewel, when I talk to you. I'm hoping that you receive it here in this public forum. So give the world whatever you have to close out tonight's show with. It's going to be dope because it's coming from you. What you got?
Thank you. Um, I just want to remind people to, during this tumultuous time, and people who feel so inclined to talk about this topic with other people, especially women, be thoughtful and just be graceful, because speaking about topics such as childbirth and conceiving with women, you never know their story and what may be triggers for them, right? And you could be putting someone in a very stressful situation or causing them distress and not even really intending to do so. So I think right now it's so hot and it's so heavy. And so I just ask and just tell people to be mindful of the space that you're in when you're talking about this topic, because everybody's going to be talking about it. Let's just face it. This is the hot news for right now. Some conspiracy theorists might say it's a distracting point because something else is going on in the background while we're talking about Roe and the whole abortion issue, and the right to conception and such. But just realize that, generally speaking, the topic of childbirth and childbearing and all of that is just a very sensitive topic for women across the board. So sometimes it's okay to just not say anything at all and just hold that space with women in particular, and go on about your day and go on about your business, and just, if nothing else, try to treat people with kindness right now, because you never know how somebody reacts in a distressed and a traumatic situation. And you don't want to be on the receiving end of somebody that has a bad reaction, and then you have to call my office for advice, right? Probably try to hire me for some reason. So
drop the number.
Right? So I don't want to get any weird emails, because apparently the way that I've been receiving calls lately, I feel like I'm like the only Black attorney from Nevada to Ghana. I could tell y'all some stories about what people are looking for me to do, even in Ghana. Anyways, but all jokes aside, it's a trying time right now. So focus on yourself and what you have going on. And if you feel like you need to talk about it, just be mindful of where you are and who you're around, right? Just be graceful and be kind and be respectful. I think that's the most that I can ask of people right now with regards to what's going on.
Ain't no half stepping with Marcus J live from our home dens, Legacy and that radio staff. I appreciate you, man. When we talked before, full disclosure, we were supposed to do a show last week and then be on hiatus for a while. So we were supposed to hang out last week, and I didn't get a chance to see you, and it sucked. And then today we decided to do a show so I could see you, but I don't see you. But I see you, but I don't see you. You know what I mean? But I'm just, I'm glad. Yeah, man, I'm just so glad to be in kinship with you, because you're such a dope sister and you just give me so much. And I appreciate, how you try to remind me in a tender manner of my feelings. And that's the cool thing for me, because you don't attack. You always make sure that you coach. And I think that's something that you do by trade, but you do it in a kin like way with me. And I'm so appreciative to you for that. And it is absolutely your gift. But because it's your gift, you share with me. So it's my gift from you. So thank you for being great. Time for you to share your final word. What you got?
Thank you. As usual, Marcus, the love will always be there and mutual, and I appreciate you. And I miss you. Our time's coming. And Tamika, it was good to have you back tonight. I appreciate you being here. I know you got the little ones around, and being a mom doesn't stop when when bedtime comes. So I appreciate your presence. I appreciate your intellect, the history that Marcus has given me on your pursuit of your education, and you being out there and being Black and excellent. I appreciate you for that. So thank you, sister, for your representation. I think that tonight, one of the words that we all have said in some way was the word grace, and being gracious and acknowledging that we should extend grace. And I'm a definition person. Even when I write, I think about the definition of words before I apply or utilize them. And the definition of grace, of all that are out there, that I like the most is courteous goodwill. Courteous goodwill. And when I think about courteous goodwill, it's one of the things that isn't applied often to either side of this conversation. I, because of how I feel personally, can understand the reactions that are not courteous or issued in goodwill, because people are truly fighting for their lives against someone that has nothing to do with their life. So it becomes harder to issue that courteous goodwill when you hear these words that are, I don't care about you, your choice, or your capabilities, desires, what you wish for your life, or even the child after you bear it. That is what people are hearing. So I would challenge people to understand what the outcomes are of every statement. There's no longer the problem that, everyone can have opinions. I think the bigger problem is everyone thinks their opinion is valid. And it often is not. It is not often valid. I don't have an opinion on how we attack cancer unless someone in my life is trying to attack cancer. And I'm there and I'm listening to them and I'm co-signing on their words. I'm not speaking as a person who, for all I, at that moment in time is cancer free. I don't get to make my voice louder. What we're starting to see is the slippery slope of a community that already is very divided, and I'm speaking specifically about the Black community, is already very divided in how we approach things, from civil rights to civil discourse within our community. This is what we're seeing right now. We're seeing how fractured we are. We're seeing how much we have been sitting back and judging one another for the things we say and don't say, for the things we have and don't have, for the things we pursue and don't pursue. And so we're leading with our voices, not our hearts. We're not being courteous, and we're not giving goodwill when we state these opinions, because our belief is that we, as Black people, have the same, I don't want to say right, but don't have the responsibility of engaging one another from a place of goodwill. And when we do this, what we're doing is cutting each other out of the thing that communities outside of us have cut us off from. We have often been outside of grace and goodwill and courtesy. And so now, as we're discussing things that are going to go down this slippery slope, this is not going to be the last time we discuss this. This is not going away overnight. We have elections coming. We have midterms coming. We have all these things coming. And I would ask people in the Black community, people who are Black and living in American Blackness, are these conversations held from a spirit of disdain and disgust beneficial to who we are and to building the nation that we need to see, the one that we say we want to see so frequently, the one that we say we want to be successful and we want to work together? Are we being courteous and gracious in a way that makes us want to come to the table? And are we also being aware that our words, when they have impact beyond just conversation, sometimes need to be restrained and retained? Have certain conversations with the people in your circle that know your heart. Save yourself. And then when you get amongst people who don't know your heart, grace means explaining yourself. And if your ego is too big to allow you to explain yourself, then what I would say is you shouldn't be having the conversation because you never cared about the outcome. You only cared about your ego. And that's my rant.
Ain't no half stepping with Marcus J live from our home dens of Legacy Internet Radio. And I want to just thank you guys again for being a part of this with us and with me. And I'll get us out of here. I won't spend a lot of time, but my rant is specifically to the brothers, to the men who are listening or watching, who may not have thought so much about what their opinions were because they were just their opinions and they didn't think maybe so much about how it affected them and the things that they may say. But, you know, when you go on Facebook or if you sit in a bar or if you're sitting in your backyard, think about what you're saying. Think about the women in your life hearing the things that you say because they are expecting you to support them. It's a fair expectation. And if your expectation is built, if your prose is built around controlling, you are not being helpful. Just be mindful of that. Just think about what your daughter would be feeling, or your mother would be feeling, or your sister would be feeling, or your best girlfriend would be feeling when she may be put in a situation where she has no choice or what feels like no choice. You may not be able to understand what that feels like, but try. And hopefully, if you allow yourself to submit to that try, you can give yourself the grace of not being so assholish with regards to control. Because the reality is, this situation that we're talking about with people not understanding that a woman's right to choose is a human right, where it is not about just them, it's about us, it's about all of us, it's about us as people, it's about us as community. Brothers, you need to stand up, man. You need to stand up because they're looking to us to support them. And who do you want to be? What side of this argument do you choose to be on? That's something that I will leave for you to think about. And I won't say any more on the topic. I think we've touched it about as well as we can. So I'll leave it there. That's my Murr. It's Marcus's unrelated rants. Got nothing to do. What we are in here talking about tonight is the end of the show. I want to remind everybody that independence is the key to building your legacy. I also want to say peace to all of the stars and all of the squares. The abundance of water, the fool is thirsty. Those are the words of Bob Marley, who you hear singing in the background. Authenticity has no competition, folks. So I need you to be well. I need you to give grace. But always remember, keep it 100. That's the end of the show. Thank you so much for everybody for rocking with us. Ain't no hashtag with Marcus J. For Tamika Robinson, our legal. For Steph B, our co-host. Peace to our brother John, who we didn't say his name tonight, but I need him to know that we love him and we miss him too. Ain't no hashtag with Marcus J. Live on Legacy Radio. Yeah. Ain't no hashtag with Marcus J on Legacy Net Radio. We'll be back in July 2022. Thank you, folks. Y'all be cool. Peace.
Oh yeah, I'm with this, I'm just gonna lay back and I'm gonna drop some smooth lyrics. So tune in 7 to 9:30 and don't be late. Ain't no half stepping with Marcus J.
I know. Bye, guys.
Anyone ever been listening to the show? Yeah, Marcus J hosting and we ready to go. Yeah, Hunters talk sprinkle with a dash of humor to the legacy listeners and the online viewers. What you wanna talk about? Call it, we hearing you. Cover all topics, touch on the main issue.